Okay, hello and welcome everyone. So, welcome all of you on the day 2 of Ocean Conference. Yesterday, we have elaborated extensively on the debate of access to knowledge and data. We also learned about the diversity of knowledge systems. We pondered on how we can integrate the traditional knowledge system into the mainstream of science and give them a place into that as well. And finally, yesterday's session ended with reflection from the Latin American model, because globally everybody accepts that Latin America has built a system where they are not dependent on the commercial publishers for knowledge dissemination, and that's a community-based system. So after that extensive debate and discussion on the open access yesterday, now we wanted to go a little bit beyond, because when we talk about open science, it's just not about how do we get access or how do we make sure that there is a seamless access to scholarly knowledge. There is another, though that is the most important debate at this point globally on the open science. But we didn't want it to confine our discussion onto only the open access or open research data, as we mentioned before yesterday as well. So let us now today ponder on some issues on how collaboration and knowledge sharing can drive innovation. So we have Richa Srivastava, Director of Makers Asylum, and Vaibhav Chhabra, Chief Learning Officer and founder of Makers Asylum. They will take us through their journey in M19 initiative, a case of collective open innovation. Before I hand over to them, let me introduce our speakers a bit elaborately. So Richa is an electronics and communication engineer by academics and also has a business degree in marketing, leadership, and strategy. She has spent over a decade of her professional career in strategically enabling ecosystems that use technology for problem solving. In her current role as a director at Makers Asylum, Richa drives strategic collaboration, partnership, and community building. Richa was awarded the prestigious Vogue Woman of the Year in 2020 for her work at Makers Asylum via the M19 initiative. Along with her, there is Vaibhav. He is a mechanical engineer by training, makers by passion, and an educator by choice. A graduate from Boston University, Vaibhav spent the first 2 years of his career at iNetra, a startup from MIT Media Labs, building portable virtual reality-based eye diagnostic device. While working with the rural community in India for the eye diagnostic prototype, Vaibhav founded Makers Asylum. Makers Asylum is the community makerspace in India focused on fostering innovation through hands-on learning. The space houses various labs that are co-located in order to facilitate prototyping of ideas that are interdisciplinary in nature, which definitely is one of the key discussion in open science discourse as well. So now over to you, Richa and Vaibhav.
Thank you so much, Mamita. Hope you all are able to hear me fine. Vaibhav, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you and be here. Thank you so much once again for having us. It's a honor and a privilege to be here speaking with you and sharing our story.
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. We have a little bit of a presentation to also show you where we're joining in from, what we've been doing for the last couple of years. And of course, we're going to talk about the M19 initiative, which is something very close to our hearts and something that also kind of like really brings about together whatever we were trying to achieve in the last 10 years as well. So it's kind of like a really beautiful story. So let me just share my screen. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, and can you hear me fine, Momita?
Yes, it's perfectly fine for both of you.
Okay, great, perfect, thank you. All right, so we're going to get started. This is where we're joining from. We are now we are in Goa. We used to be in Mumbai for several years, but this is where we are right now, where we're joining in from currently. Our space now moved to Goa. It's been about 2 years since we kind of made the shift in the pandemic. And so we are inside this beautiful 100-year-old Goan house, which we've now converted into a maker space, which is very interesting because it's kind of a very exciting dichotomy of old and new, and we really love it inside this beautiful house. So whenever that you all are ever in Goa, please feel free to drop in and visit us as well. So this is where we're joining in from. And just a little quick history about, we started Makers Asylum back in 2013. Actually, Vaibhav started it back in 2013 out of a little garage in Mumbai and Bandra, with an idea to create an open space for anybody like you, me, him, to come together, share ideas, share tools, and create a space where people could truly experiment and learn. So we moved quite a bit, started in a little garage. We were kicked out many times out of different spaces in Mumbai, and I think this is our 8th space, 7th space in Goa in the last what, 9 years of our existence. So it's been a really exciting kind of move, but every time that we've moved, the community has become bigger, the space has become more exciting, and it's just been a upward journey. So we've been very excited about that. So
Well, lucky. Well, every time it was at the brink of closing, but somehow it managed to survive.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Every time it's been the brink of closing, but every time we managed to survive. So that's been really amazing, because I think the community that we've built in the many years has come off support every time that we've made this move, and they've all come stronger with us as well. So so that's how it started back in the day. And like I said, the idea of the space was to create a space for people to come share tools, share ideas, and make things. Now we see labs inside universities. We see R&D, research development, spaces inside corporate organizations. They're like closed spaces that are not open to citizens. They're not open to community. So I think Makers Asylum, when we started, was one of the first kind of lab that was open to anyone to access. It could be anyone who had an idea. So it was kind of like that open space that was there. And I still think that there are very few labs, not many in the world as well, that are as open in terms of like access, the way that we kind of imagine and envision at that point as well. So it's been very interesting to kind of like see how a space like this enables imagination of local people as well, and things like that. So that's how we kind of like imagined it back in the day as well. So just to give you a visual insight into how it looks like, so we have anything from a woodworking workshop to metalworking workshops. A lot of artists, designers, engineers, all kinds of people who love using tools come to the space and use it themselves. So it's obviously a DIY space. For example, this is Priyank. He's a metal artist. He's making a beautiful metal table over there, you can see. Then there's, of course, we have digital fabrication lab, which has laser cutting machines. So a lot of architects, again, designers, anything to visualize in 3D. These machines are really exciting because you can go from ideation to actually prototyping very quickly. Then, of course, we have a bunch of 3D printers, electronics lab, virtual reality. So anything at the intersection of hardware design and programming is something that we really kind of like mix together in the space as well. So anybody can have access to different kind of technology as well, which is interdisciplinary, because it kind of also gives you imagination of how you can solve differently as well. So while we started off with the space with like the whole idea that people can do things themselves, like it was a DIY space that people could use the tools themselves, they could go from ideation to making themselves. But what started happening was a lot of people did not know how to use these tools. So organically, what started happening was a lot of people started coming to the space to learn. And then we started designing a lot of programs and workshops, which started getting bigger and bigger over the years. And so we have programs like the SDG School, where we work on social entrepreneurship. We work on the UN SDGs together with, again, interdisciplinary groups of people. We also work with young talents, teenagers, as part of our program, Innovation School. So we have very different levels of programs that are designed to really like encourage the whole mindset of making. And then, of course, that can lead to solving different kinds of problems. And through that, we have a bunch of alumni now in various countries. To be more precise, over 30 countries our alumni are in through our programs. And we work with a lot of really exciting partners, which include universities, developmental organizations, and things like that as well, to do various kinds of work. And of course, in the last many years, it's also become a space of innovation. It's been recognized as a hub for innovation, where a lot of people have come, a lot of startups have come. We've enabled a lot of that also. So different kinds of partners and stakeholders that work with us. And these are some of the examples of some really exciting startups that have come out of our space as well. So this is Quidditch. They are a drone company. They started out of Makers Asylum in their initial days, and now they're doing really exciting work around, for example, broadcasting cricket matches and things like that. And of course, they're doing various things with drones. So they've really progressed in this whole
augmented reality
augmented reality space as well. So doing some cutting edge work in India around drones. Then, for example, this other startup is called Farm. They're into urban farming and data-driven farming platform that they've created. They again started off at Makers Asylum. They all met together, and the whole idea of this came up over there. And then, of course, we also have a lot of startups around prosthetics and disabilities. A lot of people work on those. And then this is another startup called Orangewood Labs. Now has become a millions in dollars worth of startup, but they work on industrial robotics, which is the 6-axis robot that can be used in factories, etc. as well to kind of like do various things. So very exciting, very cutting edge. They also went to Y Combinator in the United States and things like that. So some really amazing people, some amazing work has come out of the space. So now we kind of while we started off at the maker space, I think now we've kind of graduated into a space at the intersection of education and open innovation. So we, of course, design a lot of programs where we enable people to learn this entire thought process of how you kind of like openly innovate as well. And on the other side, we also work a lot on open research and development ourselves on various projects. And I think one of the examples of something like that we did was in the pandemic, and Vaibhav's going to talk about that story. So over to you, Vaibhav.
Thank you. Well, we were doing all of these things, and a lot of exciting stuff was coming out of the space. It was quite nice, honestly. We had our space in Mumbai, quite large, about 10,000 square foot now. And then the news came in. 23rd of March, the entire country went into a lockdown. I'm sure you guys all remember that. Nobody can really forget that. So instead of going back home, all of us decided we're not going to go back home. We're going to quarantine at the asylum. Why quarantine at the asylum? Because at least we have access to all our tools. And what are we without our tools? So we thought that, if we leave, then if we shut down the space, there's no opening it again. So might as well stay here and figure out what we can do. So at that time, it was me, Anul, Naren, Richa, a few of us initially began to quarantine at the space. And the news started to pour in every day that there was this huge lack of PPE equipment. As you guys might have remembered, there was, we didn't have, because the supply chain from China was disrupted, there was hardly any PPE suits, no glasses, no face shields, nothing was coming in. So we started observing and seeing what's happening. And at the same time, we were reading about the open source community, about how is the open source community also contributing in the world. And that's when the first prototype we created was of a face shield. And that's the one that I'm wearing on the left. And we posted about it on Facebook and other places, trying to get some feedback and understand what to do next. What happened after that was pretty crazy. Doctors, hospitals, everyone started calling us. They started asking for these face shields and saying that, can you make more? Can you make more? And can you make more fast? And we don't know how to do it because obviously we're a makerspace, we're a place of experimentation. And at the same time, there weren't any shops or factories open at that time. So we said, you know what, we're going to do this. And I initially came up with a target of 1,000 face shields. Richa went ahead and changed that to 10,000 face shields. And that was quite a moment for us because 10,000 is a big, big number if you think about it. 10,000 face shields without any materials, without a proper design. How do you even do that?
Web was talking about the crowdfunding campaign. So we actually set up a crowdfunding campaign to actually support this entire I think. So our goal was 1,000, and I made it to 10,000. So it was like a public information now that we have to achieve the 10,000. That's how, yeah. So it was a crowdfunding campaign that we first kind of like embarked on, yeah.
And then very soon, what started happening was beautiful. A lot of volunteers started pouring in. So we had about 20 people, 15, 20 people in the next 1 or 2 days started to ask to be able to volunteer at the asylum. We started to bring them in. And as you can see, everyone was wearing the facials and the masks in the same way as it's done in the hospital. Not just because of the fact that we were scared and we were trying to be careful as much as possible, but more importantly also because we were testing our own products. Each and every one of these folks over here, and by the way, there were people from all different backgrounds. There were doctors, there were musicians, there were architects, there were designers, there were engineers, there were filmmakers, people from all different backgrounds came down to the space to volunteer. And the reason why we were wearing these shields all the time was to be able to test them and see how they fit, how they work, what needs to be improved. While we were also talking to hospitals, we were doing our own case studies parallelly. And we went through 21 design iterations, starting from a paper prototype all the way up to the final injection molded parts. But before injection molding, this one, the one that you see over here, the white one, these were the aha moment that went from 0 to all the way and made it be able to scale to the numbers that we want to talk about. These ones were made using laser cutting, the white strip that you see in the middle. They were made with a simple material called sunboard. And now sunboard is commonly available. And that was our little aha moment because, or our frugal innovation moment. Because if you think about it, a product like sunboard is available all across the country in every single stationery shop. It's used a lot for prototyping. It's used a lot for marketing. And it happens to be waterproof. So we showed it to doctors, we showed it to ethical committees, and they were like, perfect, this is exactly what we want. Can you make more? And we said, done. And that's when the journey began. We had ambulances, police vehicles, everything parked outside the asylum in lines, trying to pick up as many shields as possible, because as soon as we were done making, we had hospitals sending ambulances to pick them up because that was the only thing that they had to be able to transport at that time. And what we did next was something very, very special. We went ahead and open sourced the designs. This was probably about day 4 or day 5 of making the shields when we said, okay, we need to make more, and we need to make more in different cities. We can't do that internally. We need to release everything and share as much as possible. And we were doing that even from before, but still, we made it more. We started making more videos. That was the key of the assembly line inside the asylum. So we created a video about the stepwise guide on how to keep your lab safe. We made a stepwise guide on how to start making the M19 shields wherever you are. And we put all the files there so that anyone can easily access them and copy them and start making it there. What happened after that was quite amazing. Every day, more and more labs started joining us. We went from 0 to, or just 1 lab to 42 labs, cities, towns, and villages in a matter of few days. We went from everyone from BBC to NDTV News to all the press and media in the country was talking about the M19 face shields. And every single part of India, now there was a lab that was working on the M19 shield. That made it super exciting because the moment we got a request from a hospital, we were able to quickly connect them to the local makers who were being able to produce them in their same state or city. We were also able to connect foundations that were wanting to support to the local cities and foundations that wanted support in that time for the face shield. So one thing that we were doing was making and sharing the designs, but the other thing, what Richa was really doing was coordinating between the foundation, the hospital, and the makerspace, so that they can work together and support the hospitals as fast as they can. And that's what happened. We went from 0 face shields to 1 million face shields in a matter of 49 days. Now, 1 million sounds like it is a big number, but for production as well, at the time of the pandemic, this was something that was quite remarkable, thinking about it from this perspective. It took us the first seven days to make the first 100,000 face shields. And then, it took us the first 15 days to make the first 100,000 face shields. And the next 100,000 face shields were made in the next 7 days. And then towards the end, if you see, we were making about 100,000 face shields a day. The way that was happening was that if this graph was made by the community, and it's a very beautiful one, you can see that that was Makers Asylum, the yellow line at the beginning. But then other labs were joining in, and they started making face shields at different places and different things at different locations. What was really beautiful was that if you can see, some of the labs were actually faster and better than us, especially like Kolkata and Bangalore. And this was really, really beautiful for us, because now we were making more face shields as a collective than we were making face shields alone. And that's a beautiful feeling, because the collective's power was so much bigger than any of our individual powers. And that was beautiful. We were not only able to now share knowledge, but we were also learning from the other labs on how to improve the design and how to make it faster, better. And that's when we learned about things like injection molding and making our shields in that space. The other very beautiful thing was that every day we were having photographs pour in from hospitals, from police personnel, from doctors. And it was so beautiful to see that every single one of them was wearing the M19 face shield and was super happy with that. The best part about the group was the fact that it was a completely interdisciplinary group, like I was talking about. There were musicians in the room, there were child doctors in the room, there were cooks, filmmakers, of course, engineers, people from all different backgrounds got together to make this possible. The youngest member of the M19 collective was only 12 years old, and he made over 350 face shields at his home in Bhatkal with his family. And that was beautiful, because he was able to take the designs, make them at home, and be able to share it and inspire many other kids to start doing that as well. It went to a point where the University of Cambridge then wrote a beautiful case study about it. And of course, OSMS as well wrote a bunch of case studies about India and what India was able to achieve in that short point. And M19 was beautifully highlighted through all of them, which was quite prestigious for us. Not only that, then after that, we started looking at a few other designs, because now we had a network of all of these labs. So collaboratively, we started looking at a few other problems. We looked at superhero face shields for teenagers, because teenagers weren't wearing face shields. We were looking at it from a behavioral science element to look at how we can make them change their behavior and make it more fun for them to wear face shields. We made face shields for babies, which was super soft, so that they can be comfortable and simply wear them. We made active respirators for ICUs in hospitals. We made rebreather masks for the active respirators were made in collaboration with AIIMS Hospital. And then the rebreather masks we made for senior citizens to be able to breathe comfortably in their masks. While this was happening in India, the entire world contributed. The entire world's makerspaces and open community contributed to the entire open source ecosystem. Over 48.3 million units were created by the community during this time. And this is a study by Open Source Medical Supplies. And these are all open source medical equipment that was being created by the community, by makerspaces, by open innovation labs to be able to support the frontline workers in this time. Then came wave two. Wave two was very interesting. Wave two came with a different challenge, the challenge of oxygen. And there was this huge problem around oxygen. I think some of you might remember that. A lot of us were affected by that. A lot of people lost their lives during wave 2. And during this time, the big conversation was oxygen concentrator. And India was importing and talking about importing like these bulk amount of oxygen concentrators. So that's when we decided that we're going to build an oxygen concentrator, not with the thought to make many more, but with the thought to share that knowledge with local manufacturers, local makers, so that they're able to create them simply, just like the M19 initiative. But instead of making it ourselves as well, we wanted to do the R&D in an open way at Makers Asylum for all the local manufacturers so that they can start making it. So as an open science lab. And that's what we did. We started prototyping, we researched all the existing designs, and none of them were at the point of certification. So we got together a few of the most exciting makers across the country to come over here, and they were all wanting to be here. So it was great. And together we started looking at prototyping it. And we were led by Anol at this time. And we went from having nothing. And within 4 weeks, we went through 4 different iterations of the oxygen concentrator. And this is the last one that you see over here on the right, which is called the M1902. The M1902 was super exciting because one, it was a high power oxygen concentrator focused on COVID patients primarily. So it was delivering 15 to 20 liters per minute at 97% plus of purity of oxygen. Whereas the commercial ones that you were getting at that time were only 5 liters a minute, which is not really useful for COVID patients. So what we were trying to do was one, address that thing. The other thing that we were able to address during the work of the M1902 was to be able to look at humidity, because when these oxygen concentrators were coming to India, the biggest issue was the fact that they weren't tropicalized. So with the heavy humidity and the heat in India, they were going, the zeolite inside was going bad very quickly. And we were able to look at that as one of the primary challenges that we were looking at in the M1902. The M1902 is now certified and is a working great prototype, I would say still, but something that other manufacturers were able to take and use from the open source documentation to be able to create. And about 30 different labs and 30 different locations and small manufacturers were able to take our designs and create their own versions of the M1902 and use them. Some of them even went into manufacturing it. The most important thing, however, that we were trying to address via the M1902 project was actually looking at QA/QC of distributed manufacturing. Because if you think about it, when we talk about open science, we talk about open citizen-led innovation. One of the biggest challenges is that how do you make sure the same thing is created in a different place? Now that you've created something over here at Makers Asylum, how do we make sure the same quality is maintained at the other lab and you're able to create that? So you need to follow some strict QA/QC standards. And that's when Professor Jaideep and Mukesh reached out to us from Cambridge University, and we started working together. They actually funded our project as well. And then we started working together to really answer this specific question. We were fortunate to learn a lot from them, and at the same time share with them about what we were doing over here and how we can, with this consortium of labs, not only just share knowledge, but also follow a certain amount of QA/QC in a distributed network of labs. And that was our little research. The M1902 went on to become a completely open source, accessible project for oxygen concentration. And we didn't stop there. We looked at repair and reuse as one of the bigger targets. Because what also happened while we were working on M1902 was that a lot of hospitals were reaching out to us to also repair a lot of the oxygen concentrators that came to India. One of the big reasons for that was that many oxygen concentrators were brought in, but they were breaking due to shipment issues because of the zeolite going bad, due to electronic failures. A lot of different problems were coming out at this time. So with the help of the European Union, we managed to get a grant and work with them to look at a very, very specific area of repair and reuse of oxygen concentrators, where we opened up oxygen concentrators, documented how to repair them, troubleshoot them, and also hosted repair camps in Mumbai, in Goa, in Pune, in Mumbai, and a few other cities, and even digitally to help other labs to start repairing them locally for their local ecosystem. It was beautiful to be able to save so many of these oxygen concentrators that were ending up in the landfill by actually just simple fixes, simple things that we could do to just make them start working again. And that was beautiful. Even now, we continue to work in a decentralized open manner, but what we're doing at the moment is now using all of this knowledge that we've learned in the past couple of years and working with UNESCO and students from all across India. We call them our young talents and train them on solving their own problems. And some of these kids are coming up with super exciting projects now through our program. Like Rehan is working on Identify, which is something that he made for his neighbor. It's a cap with an image recognition device to help his blind neighbor understand who's standing in front of him. So, because his blind neighbor had a very simple problem. He used to feel embarrassed that he couldn't see in a social setting. And that's how it came about. And all of these projects now by these young talents are also all open source, and they're contributing back in the same philosophy, same thought to the same ecosystem of labs to learn and work together in an open, innovative manner. There is Trishid, who's working on a scarecrow, a modern day scarecrow outside in Mumbai. It's a simple little device that he attaches to his balcony, because otherwise the only thing that you have is pigeon nets that keeps the pigeons away. So he's trying to create devices to get rid of pigeon nets and allow people in Bombay to have a good view by simply putting a simple device and keeping the pigeons out. There is Aditya, who is working on saving electricity. He's working and researching on vampire electricity. And all of these guys are then applying for open hardware licenses, sharing this with their community, with other students, and innovating together with the same philosophy of M19. That's where we are. Here are some links to all the projects, especially the M19 initiative, the GitHub repository for the oxygen concentrator, and the case studies by Cambridge University are all on the link section. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions. Both of us are here. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my first reaction is like, wow, it's really mind-blowing. And it's so exciting. I think I have to stop using all this adjective because I can see there would be a lot of questions. And it makes us so happy to see that we are discussing in academic setup in India Institute of Science, open science from an academic angle, what usually all the time we do. Discuss the academic angle, see, but when we see that the philosophers that we are discussing is actually being used in practice and what changes that can be done in the innovation space is really, really very exciting. But yeah, I should now start taking up the questions. I see some. There is Roland Musbergen. So what he was, obviously he's also so impressed by the school story. So his question is that, did you do anything to promote the work you were doing at the start?
I can. You want to take that up or should I?
Oh, sure, please do. You can talk about the fun videos that we made, which went crazy.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we've also done in the past very organically is kind of like really leveraging social media and outreach digital channels, because I think for us as a social enterprise and a organization which does not have the kind of financial resources, it becomes very easy to kind of like really reach out to the community. So I think in the beginning, what we were really trying to do is kind of use video content, like for example when Vaibhav and Rain, like at our space when they were prototyping, we were putting it out there for people to see it so that we could get like interest on it. So it was very organic. So I think one of the things that we did very well was to kind of like use that social media platform to really like talk about the initiative quite a bit in a manner that really resonated with a lot of people. So I think that's where it all started, and we started gaining a lot of traction. Then we kind of then that led to kind of us creating a crowdfunding campaign, because we wanted to really impact. So at the end of the day, you need funds to kind of create the kind of like, interesting sort of real tangible thing that comes into the whole project, right? So we started kind of working on the crowdfunding campaign, and that led to a lot of really exciting things. And and I think that was the first step for us to promote it. But I think from there it started kind of picking up very organically, because a lot of newspapers and the media, they started picking up from there, because a lot of really exciting people were talking about it. So then it kind of then went into mainstream from there, which we were not really doing anything, because we were busy making stuff. We were just posting about it. So that kind of led to all of that. Yeah, so that's how we kind of like worked on the. That's how we pretty much reached out in that time.
Maybe I can just add a little bit. So I'll just share this one video over here, a link. This is from a documentary done by CNA Insider, which is Southeast Asia news channel.
Channel News Asia, yeah.
Channel News Asia, Singapore-based news channel. They made a very beautiful documentary series about exciting stuff that was happening. And this one is primarily about India and Singapore. And in India, they really beautifully talk about the M19 initiative. And during that, what you can see is the fun videos in a fun, short way. You can see the fun videos that we were creating to be allowing more people to get involved into making. One thing that we did effectively was we welcomed each and every lab, posted about them on social media and these kind of things, which sort of made that entire community-led innovation. And we got them together and made them feel as one. So things like that got many other labs join at that time was quite exciting during COVID.
And one of the things that was really interesting at the time when the lockdown had happened in India for the first time was that everyone was at home. So it was very, and we were actually one of the few people, who were actually, working at the time, because it was pretty much shut. Like there was nobody in Bombay that was out on the street. There was nothing happening at the time. So to actually talk about it at that point in time, that hey, listen, we're doing something like this was very, more inspiring for a lot of people as well, because they wanted to contribute back in some manner or the other. So that kind of led to that really real, impact of the whole initiative as well, because people wanted to contribute, but they did not know how to do it. They really took it ahead from that perspective as well. So yeah.
I just have a quick question to ask here, because see, during the COVID, we were all motivated to contribute and had nothing to do probably. How do you see that this motivation or so this momentum can be taken beyond COVID? Because that was an emergency situation, but how to involve more people, or how do you make a strategy also to share the story? Because this is a fascinating story, and we know that we can achieve a lot if people collectively work. So what do you have a strategy, or do you see something that can be not just COVID but beyond?
I think we've been doing this for the last 10 years since we started. It's not been like the first time that we've kind of done something which has been open and things like that. I think it's been the philosophy and the culture at Makers Asylum to really keep everything open. So if you've even if you see the past 10 years of our work, most of the stuff that we've done is in the open source space, like all the community projects.
Well, setting up Makers Asylum by itself is an open source project since the beginning.
What my question was that, see, you saw the excitement when the COVID hit. Probably you could make people understand the importance of sharing. So how to take it forward, that this should continue, because this is obviously very important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing that is beautiful is that sharing the stories. That's exactly what we're doing right now. The importance of sharing. And we've always believed in it. This community has always believed in it and is growing. And that's why all our programs as well, we're sharing that story and working with a lot of young talents who believe, and we want to inspire them to be able to go in the open source, open domain space. So we've been advocates of that space for the past 10 years, like Richa was talking about. It's not that we started during the pandemic, we started 10 years back. And since the past 10 years, we have been advocating this entire movement around open hardware, open source solutions, and making. Because at the end of the day, it's about, for an inventor, for a maker, for an innovator, it's about the love and the passion for making. That's what's beautiful. And how do we make that more exciting for them? And at the same time, make sure the credits go back to them. So we've been advocating and working in that space quite a bit.
And I think that there is a mind shift of things that have happened after the pandemic, because spaces like these, spaces like our spaces, have come to the forefront to kind of like also, talk about these stories, right? So there's a shift. Like we hear from parents, we hear from students that they don't want to, they want that hands-on experience. They want to do something with their own hands, because this is difficult to kind of change your mindset from being a consumer to a maker, right? Like we all are kind of like in that whole setup where we're all consuming all the time and not thinking about making or repairing or fixing. So this whole mindset, which is, always been there in India, it's kind of coming back. And I think the pandemic has really initiated that. So I think what we are primarily like focusing on is this next generation of young talents, because we really feel that that's where the impact is going to be much larger. And because if we inspire them to think differently and perceive the world differently and become more conscious, that's also very important.
We have Kishore Satpathy, who actually wants to know that how do a workshop? So in ISI Kolkata, how they can arrange a workshop with you, because they want that story to be shared. So maybe we will share your email ID with him.
Yeah,
sure. We can definitely discuss afterwards.
Yeah, we'll share our details with everyone.
So another question that he wants a clarification. When don't have a diverse set of collaborators, how can you identify what skills you don't have? Reach out to the collaborators with this kind of skills before you a reputation grew, before your reputation grew. So before all this thing happened, so how did you find the right skills or people with right skills?
So at Makers Asylum, like I said, Makers Asylum has been around for 10 years. It wasn't the first time. So we already knew a lot of folks who had the right kind of skills to be able to start prototyping and working on it before. The initial people that came in at Makers Asylum were the ones that we invited and we called up and been like, okay, the pandemic is stuck. It's time to do something. Come on over, sort of a thing. Voltron Assemble. We called it Voltron Assemble. That's what we usually refer to quite a bit, which is we call ourselves like little parts of the Voltron. And then when we all come together is when we can really do some exciting stuff. So I think the first thing that we did was call everyone, exciting folks that we knew, to come together and start working on it. The second thing that happened, which is that he wanted, was how do we, what was it, the scientific efficiency of the face shield. The way that we did that was that we were sending it to various hospitals and ethical committees at the beginning, and we were by ourselves going to a lot of the dean's houses at night, in the middle of the night, to test them and show it to them. And then they would take it to the hospital, test it in their way, and get back to us with what improvements they wanted and things like that. This was also, our shields were then eventually tested by the, what was it? The Mumbai Bio, I forgot the lab's name. And then
we were also actually, eventually we were also giving it to the government hospitals. So there was a tender that was out, and we kind of like, also applied for that. So eventually it kind of also became
official, but it started very organically.
No, but I think
okay, let's ask.
To Rowland's question last a little bit on that. I think the part of identification of skills was also very organic. While of course we curated at the beginning a few people, but post that we also kind of like really kept it open-ended in a manner that people who are enthusiastic can also learn about how to do this. Because to make a shield on a laser cutting machine was not that difficult, right? So it could be taught as well. So a lot of people also got into the whole thing and learned about it, and also got connected to people who could use a laser cutting machine and things like that, and eventually started assembling and kind of making it as well.
Gautam has his hand raised. Let him ask the question. There are some more questions. We will take it up because there are a lot of excitement about it. Gautam, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Momita. And thanks, Vaibhav and Richa, for this presentation. So I have a question regarding there are a lot of policy initiatives now, especially from the Niti Aayog, for setting up such adult tinkering labs in Kendra Vidyalayas, community innovation centers in rural areas. But their idea is to instill a culture of innovation. Do you think that those kind of maker spaces will also foster this open sharing, which your maker space has done? Do you see this kind of policy initiative help the maker culture to thrive in India?
So, personally, been an advocate of it, and at the same time, I was one of the advisors back in the day too, when Mr. Kant was setting up these adult tinkering labs. I'd gone there to help set up the list of equipment and other things as well. However, I feel like just setting up of the labs was one thing, but then instilling that culture, instilling that content, instilling that entire bit is still lacking a bit. And I have been sort of vocal about that a little bit, but at the same time, I think there has to be, while setting up of the space is super important, giving access is the most important thing. But there is also very important to build that kind of culture, and building the culture takes time and energy, and it is a gradual step in the way. So I think that is something that still needs to be worked on, but setting up the labs is a very, very important first step.
Okay, just a follow-up question. So you're saying building a space is very important. So what, according to both of you, what is an ideal space? Whether should it be within an academic institution, or shall it be a maker space ideally should be independent outside of any organization, R&D or academia?
I think that's sort of relative, and it's a subjective question. At Maker's Asylum, I was trying to create a space for folks like myself. Honestly, I'm a mechanical engineer and I love making. And when I was at INETRA in Boston at MIT Media Labs, we had access to all sorts of labs. I could walk into any lab and use the expertise and the equipment of that lab by myself and make it. For me, that's very valuable, because at the end of the day, for an engineer, one thing is that it's exciting to work with machines. It's the passion of being able to be close to them, learn about them, build things. When I came back to India, the only way that I could build a product was I had to go to service centers, or I had to go to labs where somebody else would do my work. It was always restricted access for me. So for me to be able to be close to machines was the most important thing. And I wanted to create a space for folks like myself who are also out there. And there were many of them, surprisingly, who started coming to the lab to share those tools with us. So I think having a lab open has its advantages, but its own disadvantages, because when you create an open lab, it's also very difficult to fund it. One of the reasons why internationally there are only like probably, let's say, 5 to 10 maker spaces that are completely open, like Maker's Asylum, is because of that reason. We have been going pretty much, while in India, maker spaces are still nascent. We've been going to the United States, Europe, other parts, and hosting these programs, talking about precisely this, which is how to create a sustainable makerspace. We're not there yet in India, but at the same time, internationally, the conversation is exactly that. And maybe that documentary that I shared with you can shine some light on this, because internationally, that's the bigger conversation. Because there are very, very few actual makerspaces which are open to the public and out there. They only work if they're funded by the government, or they're funded by academia, or they're funded by industry. So there needs to be a funding body associated to it.
I mean, I would add to that as well. Like, I mean, there are a lot of makerspaces that are funded by academia, but they're internal, they're close to people. They're not open to community, right? Like, so in that case, it's kind of like self-driven motivation inside that university. It's not kind of like external, motivation as well. So I feel that independent makerspaces, the business model of it is something that still needs to be explored. But but it's tough to kind of like, bring value to something like this, because especially in India, where we kind of like, our mindset about education is quite traditional still for larger percentage of where we come from. Like we all want to be engineers and doctors, but we never apply our skills when we kind of become engineers as well. So I feel that that is something that needs a mind shift. And I think that's now kind of slowly happening, and policies like what the Niti Aayog and all of that is doing is kind of reaching out to the masses and to the rural areas as well, because that shift of mindset will take some time as well, right? Where somebody says that, hey, I want to become a real engineer, where I want to use the machines and make my own product. Like that mind shift is something that will take some time.
Oh,
Thank
yes,
you.
thank you. I think from the policy perspective, we are also getting excited to understand that what kind of policy shift in the educational institution or even in the science and technology funding agency also, it might be something that we can also explore to see how, let's say, DST or DBT also come and fund this kind of initiative, so that the funding crunch that you were talking about, like, that the funding body has the certain rules and set up that in that way, but how that can be expanded to include funding for makers asylum or open in spaces also is something would be very interesting for our end to explore as well. But I would like to take one question. I mean, we are getting a little longer. I hope that you are.
Please stick to that, because we would love that, because we've been trying very, very hard to get funding from the government and otherwise, and work with the government closely to be able to create more channels of communication at least, because it's important to have this conversation on a regular day and be able to work with the DST and others to collaboratively create something like this.
I think there was a comment also that workbench projects in Bangalore is funded by DST. So probably, yeah, this is definitely a very interesting area for us also to convey to DST or the DBT or even ACRB that this the success story and what can be done. But I still like to take this question because someone asking that I mean, in academia, obviously, as Richa was mentioning as well, that, I mean, there's a closed mindset. We grew up with a very traditional way of academics and learning. So do you see that academics shy away because to take part in such kind of initiative? Because in their academic promotion structure, I mean, if you are aware of it, probably in the academics promotion structure, the thing that counts the most is the number of paper or where do you publish, like the prestige of a journal. That's probably the number one criteria for promotion, and nowadays a bit on let's say patent and all. So do you see that because there is no vested interest for them to promote such kind of thing, they do shy away? Have you
so one more thing that we've been advocating is the importance of like OSHA certification. OSHA is open hardware license by CERN. CERN is the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, and they everything that they do is completely open source. And similar to patents, if you think about it, now patents were created back in the day when we didn't have something called the internet. And at that time, when patents were created, they were created with the same thought to encourage more sharing between companies and organizations and university. Because otherwise what was happening was that people were creating stuff inside organizations, but not sharing anything. So the total collective intelligence of the planet wasn't growing. But if you think about it, when you create a patent, for 20 years, you have full rights to it, but eventually it's completely open. And even at the time that you get a patent, every single thing that you have innovated is completely open. It's a public domain. When you write a patent paper, you're actually writing it in a way that any other scientific person can copy it. And that's very beautiful. So you're releasing all that information, but holding rights to it. But if you think about it now, talking about the 21st century, where we have something like the internet, where things and access to information is super fast. And we're able to go from writing a blog to writing a paper to getting my OSHA certification really quickly. If I document my work, nobody else can get a patent on it. If it's documented on the internet, nobody else can get a patent on it. That's straightforward. So that's one first right. The second thing is, if I quickly apply for an OSHA certification, which is more like a Creative Commons license, I'm actually putting my information out there and saying that fair enough, yes, I've innovated it. I am accepting that you can go ahead and copy it and make it because that's okay. I don't want to get stuck in legal battles, but I'm also, but if you're using it, give me credits for it. That's what the OSHA certification goes to. And as an innovator, the maker, I can tell you that if you're creating products today, especially if they are not at the point of getting a technology patent, which is something like a laser or something like a new kind of a sensor or whatever. If you're only trying to get a patent on something like a design or a utility, it doesn't make sense anymore because it's so easy to go around your patent that anyone can go around it in 2 minutes and you'll just be stuck in legal battles. So it makes sense to go with the open source hardware association licenses, share that publicly, get the credits for it, and at the same time, continue to hold the rights for it, and then continue to build on top of it. So you can use that to be able to go to the market first. You can go sell your product. You can share it. You can do a lot of things with it. You can do whatever you want, basically. So I think
that's no, sorry, please. Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is that there is a shift in mindset over there. There is a shift in thought, and that's what I think is going to be valuable. That's what we cater to. So what we count is the number of OSHA certifications that Makers Asylum has produced now, or the number of open source projects that have come out of Makers Asylum. And there have been now documented over 200 projects, which we're very happy to say. So the point is that we're contributing back to the open source community, not just taking from it, because a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, a lot of institutions just look at taking open source software and open source data, but we're also contributing back. And that is, if not today, in the next couple of years, it's going to be a big conversation, I think.
But that's actually a very good idea because as the question actually of Ronald was suggesting that this is a very good way to count the number which is being counted in academic, let's say, promotion system. So that can be a number to be count. So
at least for the open source makerspaces, I think OSHA certifications are the number to be counted now. That's the new thing.
Then in the academic setup also, they don't have to go for a patent because that's also a debate that we use the public funds. So then how can we, I mean, that's a kind of ethical question, using public fund, then going for a patent, and it's probably appropriating the funds itself. So in that sense, such kind of licensing will give the credit to the whoever has designed or got the innovation. So it's very interesting, but I would take the final question because we are getting a little too late, I guess. So the last one is Makers is what I understand. It is kind of a skill development. My question is this program help in job generation?
Yes, very much so. One, every single school organization is hiring makers at the moment, because they want to run the maker labs. That's just one little thing. Folks that have worked at Makers Asylum have now gone into very interesting things, like the person who's working at the chief minister, at the prime minister's office right now for advocating around Niti Aayog, innovation labs and everything, has been from Makers Asylum itself, is an employee of Makers Asylum. But leaving that, people who've been using stuff like at Makers Asylum, the skills and learning different programs, have not only gone to get jobs, but have gone to create more and more jobs. And that's very exciting because over 40 companies have come out of Makers Asylum in just the past few years. And this is without any funding. This is while we were trying to grow ourselves, we were able to produce 40 plus startups that came out of Makers Asylum. And if we look at how many people are they employing, Orangewood Labs by itself has over 500 employees now, I'm guessing. So if you look at that and then multiply it by like a few other startups that have come out, there has to be at least a few, maybe at least a few thousand folks that have used Makers Asylum, learned the skills, and been able to get a job or created jobs through that process.
I mean, in addition to that, we ourselves hire from the community because we've been like working with a lot of makers ourselves to create a lot of content.
Sorry, I need to run, but I'm going to pass this on to Richa to answer this last question. Sorry, thank you. One second.
Yeah, no, I was saying that it's just, I mean, we ourselves have been hiring from the community as well, because we've been designing a lot of programs and we need the kind of skill set to kind of develop content and, do more things with it. So it's important to have folks who also know how to use them. So we kind of also train and hire out of our own community ourselves as well. So yeah, so there are multiple avenues of kind of like job creation and, all of that kind of thing that are entailed with it.
Momita, you're on mute.
Sorry, thanks, Gautam. Yeah, so thanks, Richa, for answering the final question. And this was a very exciting talk. We see so much of enthusiasm from the participant as well to learn from this. So definitely we will share your email IDs with the folks who wants it. I hope that's fine with you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
No problem
okay,
at all.
Okay, thanks a lot. So yeah. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you so much for having us. It was such a pleasure to be here and meet everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so now we will move to our next talk. So we have another interesting topic to discuss. There's climate actions and open science. The speaker of this session is Professor Saleemul. However, due to sudden changes schedule, Professor Haq is unable to join us in person. So he has recorded a short presentation for the participants to briefly introduce this topic, and we will play that short, about 10 minutes video now. But before going to that, I would like to introduce Professor Haq. So Professor Haq is the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development, and professor at the Independent University, Bangladesh, as well as associate of the International Institution on Environment and Development in United Kingdom. In addition, he's the chair of the Expert Advisory Group for the Climate Vulnerable Forum and also senior advisor on locally led adaptation with Global Center on Adaptation, headquartered in the Netherlands. He is an expert in adaptation to climate change in the most vulnerable developing countries and has been a lead author of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th assessment reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. And he also advised the least developed country group in the United Nations Framework Conservation and Climate Change. In addition, he's affiliated with the UN Food System Summit for 2021 as co-chair of the Action Track 5 on building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress. He has published hundreds of scientific as well as popular articles, organized top 20 global influencer. He is recognized as top 20 global influencer on climate change policy in 2019, top scientist from Bangladesh on climate change science. Recently, he has been appointed as Officer of the Order of British Empire, OBE, in 2022. New Year honors for services to combating international climate change. Yeah, he has a lot of experience on the climate change, and we as in South Asia, we're really vulnerable to climate change. So his short talk would be very valuable for us to learn. Thank you.
My name is Saleemul. I'm the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development at the Independent University, Bangladesh, in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I'm sorry I can't join you in person, but I'm very happy to share some thoughts on the issue of climate change adaptation. How do we generate knowledge and science of adaptation? And in particular, what is the role of citizen scientists, of local people, and how can we promote that and take it forward in the context of South Asia, and particularly in the context of Bangladesh, where I am based. So let me start with the science of adaptation to climate change. Now that climate change is already happening, we don't need to convince anybody that it is happening. All we have to do is to read the newspapers and watch television news, and it's happening somewhere all the time. Right now, Pakistan is completely flooded by the impacts of glacier ice melt, rain, river flow, overflow, and many other elements that have caused the biggest floods that I've ever seen. Millions of people have been displaced. Well over 1,000 people have lost their lives. And that is the future of impacts of climate change going forward. Now, in order to deal with these impacts, anticipate them, and prepare ourselves to adapt to them, we need to enhance our knowledge about where those impacts will be, when they will be, how big will they be, and in particular, how the local people who will be affected can be enabled, empowered, and allowed to prepare themselves with a combination of their own indigenous experiential knowledge, because they know about these things, as well as the scientific knowledge by the international and national scientific experts and other decision makers and financiers. So when it comes to generating knowledge about adaptation to climate change, it's very important to realize that generating new knowledge is a process of learning by doing, which means that the researcher has to join forces with the practitioner to do things and learn from them. The practitioner does, the researcher learns, but they have to work together to co-generate knowledge on adaptation. And that is actually happening all over the world, in particular in the aspect of what we now call locally led adaptation. This is a process of involving the vulnerable communities in generating knowledge based on their own experience, and then combining that with the knowledge that comes from the more formally trained scientists and researchers to come up with ways to better adapt to the impacts of climate change. Now, it's important to point out that adaptation is never perfect. It's always imperfect. We will minimize impacts of climate change to some extent, but not to zero. And over time, as climate change gets worse, then adaptation has limits to how much we can adapt. And in some places, we are reaching those limits. And we are suffering what we now call losses and damages due to human-induced climate change. So we also now have to combine locally led adaptation to prepare for future climate change impacts, and also address the losses and damages that are already occurring at the local level. And so we have now, in the local level adaptation arena, also added local level loss and damage assessments and responses as an additional theme for further research. We have very little knowledge and research on this, and so we need to do that very rapidly. So the point I'm going to make now is that in order to make this knowledge, scientific knowledge, more effective, it has to be informed by experiential knowledge of practitioners on the ground. And in Bangladesh, we have been doing this for some time now. In fact, it's happening all over the world. We have a platform called Gobeshona, which is a Bangla word for research, which is a global platform of practitioners and researchers working on locally led adaptation. And every year, in the first quarter of the year, we have a global conference where we hear from practitioners all over the world. It's an online conference. We run it for 7 days, 24 hours a day, starting with 8 hours for the Asia Pacific time zone as the sun goes up and down there, and then 8 hours for the Africa and Europe time zones, and then a third 8-hour shift for the Americas, North, South, and Central time zones. And then around the world again, 7 days, and we have about 100 or so sessions from many, many different countries, including many from South Asia, but also from Australia, Japan, developed countries in Europe and North America, because climate impacts are happening, local people are suffering, and local people are adapting wherever they are. While every place is unique and specific, nevertheless, there are things that are in common that we can share with each other and learn from each other, and I'll mention a couple of them. The first one is that whenever there are impacts of climate change, but also other kinds of negative impacts like the COVID-19 virus that affected the globe recently, the primary victims are almost always the poorest citizens of their own countries or wherever they live. Whether they be in a rich country like the United States or Canada, it's the poor people in those countries who have suffered the most. And in poor countries, there are many more poor people and they suffer the impact. So there is an important governance dimension to this. The impacts of climate change are not poverty neutral. They affect the poor more than the rich in any given country. And that's a universal phenomena that we can all address and look at in terms of how do we improve the opportunities for the more vulnerable, more poor populations within any governance system to affect decisions that are made at a higher level, at the national level, and indeed at the global level. And so this local level adaptation science is a new and emerging area of science where the researchers who are the formal scientists who come with our degrees from universities, we need to work with local people and empower them, recognize them, provide them with a platform, allow them to share their knowledge and co-generate the impacts of climate change and how to deal with those impacts together with them. And that, in my view, is a new and emerging area of science, adaptation science, and Bangladesh is one of the world leaders in this, and indeed South Asia as a whole is one of the world leaders in this, because they differ from ecosystem to ecosystem. The coastal zone is different from the mountain zone, is different from the drought-prone zone, is different from the cyclone-prone zones. So for each different climate hazard, local people are generating knowledge on adaptation, and the scientists are joining with them to co-generate good adaptation measures to deal with the impacts of climate change. And South Asia has the potential to be a global leader in this co-generation of knowledge on adaptation to climate change.
Now we will take a break because our next talk is at 12 o'clock. So we ask the participant to take a break and then come back at 12 again for the next talk before the lunch break. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So after the break, I guess everyone is recharged. So we will start our next session, and we again have a speaker. Actually, the last session we ended with a speaker from Bangladesh, Dr. Saleemul. Now we have another speaker from Bangladesh, Dr. Haseeb Irfanullah. Before I give the floor to him, I will introduce Dr. Irfanullah. So he is a biologist turned development facilitator who often introduces himself as a research enthusiast. Over the last 2 decades, he has worked for different international development organizations, academic institutions, donors, and the government of Bangladesh in different capacities. Currently, he is an independent consultant on environment, climate change, and research system, and is also involved with University of Liberal Arts Bangladesh as a visiting research fellow. As an associate of IISc UK, he has been involved in mentoring and designing and facilitating capacity building sessions and dialogues for young and mid-career researchers and journal editors to improve their understanding of journal publishing practices and standards. He also writes article and thought pieces on scholarly system and worked with pertinent agencies to improve research ecosystem. A shape of the scholarly kitchen blog, Haseeb has a PhD in aquatic ecology from the University of Liverpool, UK. I must mention that actually I got introduced with Haseeb's work through the Scholarly Kitchen blog because that I follow quite regularly. And I hope that our participants will be able to learn a lot because most of us are part of the academic ecosystem and we want to know about how we can use all the global initiative and the open science that would help us to engage more broadly with the ecosystem. So thank you for joining, Haseeb. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Momita. It is a great pleasure and honor to be part of this. And thank you very much for having me, sharing some of my thoughts. Let me share my screen first. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, thank you. So the topic I would like to share some thought on is there are so many different global initiatives which can actually help us, South Asian institutions as well as researchers. If we want to focus more on open access or open data, open science, open review, there are so many open things nowadays we have been talking about. So very quickly, over the last 360 years, things have changed a lot. On the left-hand side, you can see the first issue, which was published in 1665, the Philosophical Transaction. And from then on, I just took the screenshot on the right-hand side of the same journal. Amazing, isn't it? It is not only the transformation happened from print to online, the way we actually review our manuscript, whether it will be single or double blind or anonymized, whatever we call it, the way we actually look for references, the bibliography, the software that we use, the search engine that we use. And of course, the journals, they used to be very, very concise, very in silo, communicating, researchers are communicating among themselves, writing a note, presenting a paper. Now we moved to not only the journal, not only the subscription one, the hybrid one, the open access one, preprint. There are so many different models now to communicate our research in written form. But although these kind of a contrasting pictures I'm showing on this slide, but something happened over the last 10 years or so, or last 2 decades or so. But before moving into that, let us quickly look into research system. Because that is just a quick introduction to it. We all know about it. Research is not only just conducting and publishing it in journals. Of course, the first step is accessing research, because whatever we do, we build our new research knowledge creation endeavor based upon the past one. So whether it is research data, journal, books, you just name it. Once it is done, we build on that base, and we create our new research, we design it, we conduct it, we collect data, analyze, present, and draw some conclusion. So we are conducting research, which is the second step, second component, I would say, of research system. The third one is we are very much familiar with, we need to communicate research. It is not only through the thesis papers or thesis that we write, it could be research project reports, journal articles, posters, and definitely peer reviewers come in at this stage more rigorously. And when we communicate our own research, it becomes part of the past research, and it will help others to go forward. That's why accessing research is so important. But these are not the 3 components only. Unless we use the research in different sense, not only it has to be applied every time we conduct a research, the findings or the results will have a practical application. We can move forward our knowledge we can change policy practices. I'm talking about research impact and research translation. And once we translate the research and create impact, through that process, we can actually, there's a feedback loop that we actually encourage other new research to be conducted, because implementing policies can generate new ideas, new problems, new challenges. So we can see that there is a kind of downward and upward linkages among these. But in recent years, something has changed, because we have learned that if we really want to create impact, if we really want to advance our knowledge ecosystem, we have to think of openly available system. And it is not about only open access in terms of journals. It could be open data, open repositories, the research system, and of course, peer review system, as well as the open science as a whole, the whole thing. And as you can understand, it is actually touching upon all the different components of research system. And it has become a momentum over since the 20 years back, since the declaration of open access or open science. Just in 2018, I will give you very quickly two references. 12 institutions, they came together, they created Coalition S, and they told that, well, research should be immediately freely available to everybody. And that's there are 10 principles of Plan S. I'm not going into the detail. But just a couple of weeks back, to be specific, on 25th August, the Executive Office of the President of the United States, there was a memo was issued, and it created a serious, what do you call it, both positive discussion in support of it, as well as negative one. And it is saying, it is calling itself a memo, the subject line, as you can read probably, ensuring free, immediate, and equitable access to federally funded research. So you can understand all the federally funded research of the USA should be immediately available. And they have given a couple of years to prepare all the institutions to prepare themselves, especially if you're having a budget of $100 million per year. So you can understand how many institutions, they do receive $100 million per year. They have to abide by. So, and lots of discussions are going on. So we can see that many things are happening in Europe, in America, elsewhere. Yesterday, we heard so many different country perspective, how things are moving in different countries. But here I will be focusing on specifically two specific examples. How they are moving forward and how can we capitalize on them. So the first example is very familiar one. I have heard yesterday, quite a few presenters have talked about it. Research for Life, which was established exactly 20 years back in 2002. And five UN agencies, they came together representing different areas, health, environment, law, agriculture, and so on. But what they have done so far? Well, there are now 20 years later, it is a kind of a combination, a consortium or partnership of more than 200 publishers. Of course, the main one is Elsevier. Elsevier Foundation supports it quite strongly. 2 top universities of the world and many technical partners are there. What they're doing, their membership is huge. More than 10,500 institutions are spread over 125 countries. They are now accessing 163,000 journals and books. So it's amazing. But if we can quantify, actually they did it early this year, Research for Life, and they estimated that all those researchers, hundreds and thousands of researchers, they're accessing, you can quantify it like they're actually accessing the resource which can be valued almost $50 million per year. So how big? But their budget is very small. It is $300 to $400 only per year, Research for Life. And if we look into what are these 125 countries, these are the top 10 countries. And as you can see, the top two countries in top three. One is my country and another is Nepal. We have another Asian country, which is Vietnam. So all the numbers beside the name of the country is the number of institutions. So Nigeria, from Nigeria, more than 700 institutions have become member of Research for Life. From Bangladesh, almost 500. It may be questioned that, well, access to research, reading global literature for free or paying a very small amount of fee is a fantastic thing, no doubt about it. But given the fact now we are talking about open science, open research, open access journals, it is growing exponentially. It can be easily questioned, is it still relevant? Having a platform called Research for Life, which is offering free or giving access in exchange of a small amount of fees. There was a study, I was also involved in that. It was conducted between June 2020 to June 2021. And the summary is, yes, researchers, they told that Research for Life is still relevant for us. It is still effective, it is creating impact, and we need it. And some numbers, when the Research for Life users, individual users were interviewed, they said that Research for Life is still now, it is very valuable for their career, developing their research skills, enhancing their research quality as well as quantity. Because Research for Life doesn't only give the access to different journals, but also it offers different training sessions, webinar, and so on and so forth. But something interesting happened in June this year. Research for Life, it has published, I have given the link here. It has publicly opened or declared its new strategic plan, and they are calling it Vision 2030. Actually, they are trying to align it with the SDG. And the aim is very simple, very, very pertinent. Actually, it is very much linked to the shared, the core aspect of this particular OSSAN conference. So the aim is to create an inclusive, diverse, and equitable scholarly communication environment that enables all global researchers, not only from the South or developing countries, all global researchers to address societal challenge. But if we look into the theory of change, there are quite a few components, but I would like to focus on one particular one, which says that the researchers from the lower income countries, like the participants today, many of us, they should be actively participating in research communication by publishing in peer-reviewed journals, and which includes, obviously, open access journals. And most importantly, this is fantastic part after the word "and," they should be fully represented across the editorial roles, not only authorship, in the publication worldwide, not only in their region, so that they can have a kind of an equitable knowledge ecosystem. They can experience that. And the term they use, they can experience a level playing field, which is currently missing. That's why they have identified quite a few things. Well, definitely they will be investing in research infrastructure so that the member countries as well as institutions and researchers can have improved access. They're particularly focusing on the bullet point 2, which clearly says that this over the next 8 years, Research for Life will be working with its partners so that they can ensure equitable engagement of Southern researchers, like those from South Asia as well as Asia, in open access shift, because you all know there's a shift happening. So that should be equitable engagement. And they will be focusing on capacity development, not only of the researchers, but also librarians. And finally, they will be focusing on financial sustainability. And they have launched a new program called Friends of Research for Life to generate funds. Because although the budget is very small, $300,000, but still they are struggling to manage it, given the greater demand. So they are trying to have a very broad, very good, very timely vision, but they have some struggles to tackle. So what I did just a few months back, in July actually, I wrote a piece at Scholarly Kitchen that Momita mentioned, where I often write as a chef. We call ourselves chef because we often cook the new ideas or new thinking in that blog. Please feel free to follow that. What I suggested 4 points that Research for Life shouldn't think, how can it work as a service provider? It should go beyond being a service provider. That was my main argument. So Research for Life should be working with the Southern, national, and regional research systems. They need to influence them. Otherwise, structural changes wouldn't be happening. So the first point I suggested is Research for Life is doing so many fantastic things. They are allocating money to in the infrastructure, to develop infrastructure, to provide services to us. In fact, they are, we discussed it yesterday a lot, that APC, article processing charges, are huge. But Research for Life, it has got two different countries. One is A category countries like Bangladesh, Nepal. We do have free access. We do have free access to all the paper. Not only that, we can publish in different journals without paying any article processing charges. That is fantastic. The charges would be $5,000 even, but we are not paying. Of course, there are other countries like Nigeria and others. They have to pay a discounted one, not 100% waiver. But my suggestion is Research for Life should work with the countries, Research for Life eligible countries and their institutions, so that we can take the burden, the financial burden of Research for Life, and we can pay, we can contribute financially as well, because we are getting so much benefit out of it. And that also help us to be part of the governance structure of Research for Life as well, because we will be paying for the service, whatever the amount is. The second point I focused on, that many of the Research for Life countries, they will graduate. For example, Bangladesh is still least developed country, so is Nepal. But by 2026, officially, we will be graduating to lower middle income country or developing country. But what does that transition mean? I was just listening to Dr. Guna Bhandari yesterday afternoon, and she was actually talking about it. What would happen when that shift will happen? Because everything will be the same, but we will be graduating. So I was suggesting that Research for Life should work with Southern institutions like those from the South Asia. And the dialogue shouldn't be only among researchers. We need to involve politicians, policymakers, bureaucrats, whether we like them or not. Otherwise, if we don't come together and design the roadmap, how our national research ecosystem will transform as our economy is transforming, nothing will change. Many things we will be losing many facilities because we are no longer least developed country, but we are not thinking in that direction. My third proposition was, we often only talk about research access, capacity of researchers, but I was proposing we need to focus on research impact as well. And when I say research impact, I'm not talking about impact factor only, citation, site score, not all these things, or university rankings. But it is more. We need to show that what true change is happening on the ground, not only how many people are citing my research. And in the Global South, we can do that because we have that NGO system or development system. So we can show that translation. That will give we researchers, we practicing research, the confidence to talk with our policymakers, our politicians, as well as the society. And from the South, from South Asia, we will be confident as well to become a citizen, a real citizen of a wider scholarly world. So this is a very interesting opportunity for us. The fourth one is one of the measurable outcomes that is mentioned in this strategy is Research for Life will work to improve the profile of Global South's publishing industry, the journals, whether it is institutional journals or society journals. We don't talk about it. And many of those journals are diamond open access. It means that it is just free for everybody. You don't need to pay as an author. You don't need to pay as a reader. So that is a fantastic opportunity for us to work with Research for Life and uphold the journal that we have. I will be sharing some challenges of the journals that we often publish in my next few slides. But these are the four contexts and opportunities where Research for Life can work together with Southern institutions, including South Asian institutions, and make their strategic vision successful. Now, coming to my second example is IISc. I have been working with IISc. It was formed back 30 years back. Now their name is a bit different, but it used to be International Network for the Availability of Scientific Publications. So you can understand in early 90s, availability of scientific publication was the main thing. And they did amazing things. For example, for 12 years, they ran this particular program called PERI. And that PERI program is talking about accessing research. And yesterday afternoon, we heard Professor Tariq from Bangladesh, and he was involved in that venture as well. But at the end of the 1990s, IISc, which is an Oxford-based charity, they started thinking that, no, only accessing is not enough. What about the research happening in the Global South? How can we build the profile of it? So one approach would be Journal Online. That was a fantastic venture which has started in 1996 probably. And the first Journal Online was African Journal Online. Journal Online, in brief, it is called JOL, J-O-L. And at the beginning of this century, we have some Asian journals online, like Bangladesh Journal Online, Nepal Journals Online, and of course, Sri Lanka Journals Online. And as you can see, if you can read, there are hundreds of journals available, freely available on those platforms. And the full text, thousands of papers are available in full text form. For example, in NepJol, you can just have, almost 30,000 PDF version of full paper. That is amazing. But the problem is the quality. You can always ask for it, and I admit that not all the journals there are active. There, for example, 157 journals on Bangalore, not all are active. So what they did in 2017, if I remember correctly, Journal Publishing Practices and Standards that was designed by IISc, which was a kind of award-winning venture. What they did, they created a scoring system, and they ranked all the journals available on different journals online. The highest a journal can get 3 stars. Most of the journals actually got 2 stars, including my journal, on the Journal of Taxonomy. So it gives us a direction that where do we stand? Because almost all those journals, they are not indexed by Scopus or by Web of Science or any citation index. That's why that kind of ranking or categorization was quite useful. But their long-running intervention includes AuthorAid, which is a platform which is bringing together 26,000 researchers, young researchers mostly from almost all from the Global South, 175 countries altogether. And they have a mentoring programs. I'm involved with that mentoring program since 2009. There's a journal club, discussion forums, Google group, They also have virtual networking. We call it tea time with author aid. But capacity development has been a fantastic initiative by IISc. They do have a Moodle. And in fact, from today, 6th September, a new training is being conducted, facilitated by IISc, which is about scientific research and proposal writing. It happens twice a year. One is on science, another is social science. I just finished last month another training program, which was organized by IISc for editors from the Global South, from Nicaragua to Vietnam. Of course, what I mean, not passing on you. And it was fantastic. There are so many things can be done, and these are all for free. And very recently, actually the deadline was 2nd September, IISc has launched a new community seed grants, which actually help different institutional or regional or national hubs, so that whatever is being done by author aid or facilitated by author aid centrally, now it would be facilitated at regional level, national level, institutional level. So I think they are going to offer initially 8 proposals, some funding, some support, and we'll see how it evolves. Now, we have heard 2 very specific examples, but there are so many different global initiatives. We often don't think it as initiatives, but we can actually be part of. We can harness those initiatives, we can capitalize on their experience, and we can collaborate with them. For example, C for this. Since we are talking about diversity inclusion, there is a coalition of publishers and other entities which talks about in scholarly communication, how can we enhance diversity and inclusion, not only in terms of gender, not only in terms of race or culture or geography, it is all. And they have different toolkits. Talking about age diversity in our academia or on the editorial board, we can tap on the experience or the network of Global Young Academy. And I'm sure there is I know for sure that in Nepal, in India, in Sri Lanka, if I'm not wrong, there are national young academies as well, country chapters. We can capitalize those initiatives. Of course, they have a bigger one. In the inaugural session yesterday, we have heard from different fellows, esteemed fellows from Bangladesh, India, Nepal, who represented Academy of Sciences. And we do have African Academy of Sciences and other Academy of Sciences. We can work with them, we can link with them, we can collaborate with them. And there are so many regional initiatives we can learn from them. Africa Archive, they are talking about preprint and repositories. We have a very fantastic training center, TCC, based in Nairobi. I talked about African Journals Online. There are hundreds of journals, and they have fantastic screening system to make a journal a member. We have repository network like La Referencia in Latin America, so is Silo. We have theme-based network of developing countries. For example, we have talked about climate change. I'm sure I couldn't listen to him. Professor Saleemul definitely talked about, I believe he talked about LAG initiative, because he actually initiated, facilitated, and is still leading this initiative. Least developed countries University Consortium on Climate Change. And finally, 2 years back, actually it will be 2 years next month, United Nations and the International Publishing Association, they formed a compact. They proposed a compact. It is called Sdg Publishers Compact. I'm sure we are representing different small publishers as well, because as an editor, we are also publishers, which if it is society journals. We can be part of it. There are quite a few, more than 100 publishers now part of it, small and big. And they have 10 action points that they are supposed to abide by, work towards, and report back. These are all fantastic initiatives happening all over the world. They are so diverse. We can identify which actually be useful for us. So I'm at the end of my presentation. So I would like to focus on 3 specific points, as we have heard. The first thing is there are so many different things happening globally. Sometimes I feel like, is it a kind of a neo-colonialism? Something is being imposed upon us. We are just looking at the North and they are dictating us or guiding us or telling us to do something. And we are trying to do that, complying with that. I think whatever is happening in this dynamic publishing ecosystem or research ecosystem, we need to understand it and contextualize it. Whether it is, for example, COPE guideline and whatever the practice is, open access policy, Plan S, you just name it. We have to be very aware of it and contextualize it before we adopt it. The second point is, as I mentioned it before, we need to think of the real impact of our research, not only just citation factors, scores, indices, and ranking. No, more than that. Because sometimes those ranking guides us so much, we forget about the real purpose of research. And we need to focus on the people. Because whatever the things we are saying, whatever the policies we are making, ultimately, the research communication and the research and before that, it is actually meant for many of us, it is our job. We get recruited, we get a scholarship, we get promoted. If open science concepts, that is we are trying to adopt, but our system, our recruitment policies and rules and regulations is not appreciating that, we need to connect these 2 worlds, if I may call them. Otherwise, it will never make any change, real change. Finally, the discussions that we have been having over the last 2 days and we will be having tomorrow as well. I think those are giving us and those should give us how can we transform our thinking, our efforts, our perceptions. Definitely, we are talking about, well, we need technology, we need infrastructure, we need technological innovation. We need to update our old policies, for example, open science policy of 2014 that needs to be revised in India, or Bangladesh needs to prepare its own new policy. We need to change practice. Yes, all are good. And definitely, those will enhance the value of our research, the journal we are representing, enhance our impact, enhance the impact of those journals. Those actually help us to sustain us as an institution. And while doing that, I'm sure we will be contributing or at least advancing towards equitable knowledge ecosystem. That's fine. But we need to think beyond our comfort zone. We need to think, what are the other networks we can be part of? How can we collaborate with the northern institutions as well as southern institutions? I have given particular examples. And we need to learn from and capitalize on. There is a fantastic pool of perspective, expertise, knowledge, experience. We don't need to invent the wheel. Because if we want to create an open science culture, definitely conferences like these, interactions like these, that creates the momentum, no doubt about it. But we need to capitalize on those national, regional, and international expertise and perspective. If we can do that, that will help us to change our approach and we can shape our future, our scholarly future. We can shape it and we can make it sustainable. We can make it equitable. We can make it resilient. And of course, we can make it open. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Haseeb, for this wonderful presentation. And I hope that the participants have noted the initiative that globally exists, which we can take advantage of to publish in the journals that we want, like, without thinking of the barriers, because there are initiatives which can help us at this moment. And I also would like to thank you to pointing out that these are just the solution for now, but we have to look beyond or broader, that we can make our ecosystem so strong that we are not dependent on other all the time as well. So more collaborative. Thank you for this wonderful perspective. So I will first take a question that we have in the chat box. So the participant is asking that societal impact of basic research, how can it be assessed? Because it doesn't have direct application. So when we are talking about that we can have certain reforms, or we don't look into citation or all these parameters to judge a research, then and if you have talked about societal impact, basic research might not have anything direct or very quick. So then how can we go beyond these traditional tools?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, that was discussed yesterday as well, isn't it, Momita? That yes, we have to separate that. We have to always separate that. We need to showcase. We need to invest for basic science. There is no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And there is a need for that. And it is not like that. We have to show the long-term implication of all the basic research, which cannot be directly applied. For example, in case of, say, there are some studies on, say, social theories. How we can define, how can we explain societal challenges, those social theories? We can talk about it. We can show that direction. Not necessarily we can show the impact on the ground, but we can show the path. I do that when I do social research. I show the path. But the problem is we researchers stop there. We believe that someone else will pick it up and translate it for the policymakers. I would argue that it is we shouldn't stop just by publishing our research in a fantastic journal with high impact factor. Nobody reads the conclusion and the recommendation section. No politician will go. We need to think of research communication as well, not only through journals and attending conferences, but how we can involve. That's why I mentioned we need to bring together politicians, bureaucrats, and researchers together. Otherwise, things will not happen. Our mindset will not change. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you for the answer, because I think that gives a lot of perspective that the researchers need to engage beyond their academic setups with the policymakers, even with the politicians, with everyone. So far, we are living in a closed system, and that's where one of the reasons that we have the conference to start that dialogue and make researchers aware that we cannot just stop at writing it in some high impact journal and the job is over. I will move to the next question actually. So there's a question: how do you think that Bangladesh and India can collaborate on the open access fund? And do you think that open access publishing platform in South Asia region can work given the stressful geopolitical situation in the region? I think you are on mute.
Yes, why not? Because it has been stressful and it will continue probably stressful. You know, you can't imagine. So forget about those stressful situations. Because collaboration is happening. We are collaborating to build power plant. We are collaborating to build so many things. We are sharing our rules for economic development of both countries. So if those can happen, and stressful or apparent stressful situation is not impacting those, why that should be impacting our collaboration regarding open access? We always keep research and researchers separately. It is sometimes I believe that we are also should be blamed for that. We are keeping ourselves aloof. I'm not saying that all researchers should be politicians and we should be, taking part in local elections. Yeah, we can do that. If other people from other disciplines, but we are not thought of as celebrities. We are not thought of as a public figure. That's the problem. That's why we need to break that, and we need to be vocal. I can give you a very quick example. up to 2010, we didn't use the word transboundary when we are talking about water. And I can remember a project between Bangladesh and India, which was facilitated by IUCN. They crossed the word transboundary from that, and they translated it into Ecosystem for Life, a Bangladesh-India initiative. So instead of transboundary water, ecosystem for life. But within 4 years, things changed. When a follow-up project was designed by Oxfam, the name of that project was TROSA, and T stood for transboundary. So you see, continuous talking about it, you can make an apparently political issue kind of a non-political issue or non-politically biased issue. So I thank Momita and her team for having this type of conversation and making it so inclusive in each and every panel or the session, how the region was represented. I think that will help us to break the ice if there is any ice. Thank you.
I believe that there is no ice. It's just that we have not been able to convey that there is no ice. And that is what we were trying to do through this conference even. And also I would like to, probably you can also highlight it a bit, how we can do it, because researchers in our region are a lot of the time are very shy. We don't engage even in the internet. As you were saying, we are not public figure because somehow it is a mindset that we take that we are in the institution. We don't need to come on the open. So for example, we see that the Western researchers or so-called researchers there engage a lot through Twitter and all these platforms, where from our side, it's not so much. So how do you see that we can, as a researchers, or even this from the team also, can engage or use this kind of social media tools to enhance? So that would be the final question for this session.
Sure. I think you have hit it to a very important point, because the negative impact of social media, we are very much aware of it, but why can't we capitalize on the positive side of it? And we can't be social media shy when we are talking about our profession as a researcher. But we need to be very strategic about it. We need to be very specific about it, which platform you will be using to influence whom, who will be your target audience, how you can bring them together. So there's the culture, a particular discipline can start and other can learn from that. I can see nowadays in my Facebook friends who are researchers, oh my goodness, they are just uploading or posting the news of how fantastic paper they have published. The problem is, they are talking more about what's the impact of that paper rather than what impact the research will actually bring in. So the message is not right. So they are focusing on impact factor 7 rather than that particular distribution of bird can help us to identify how climate change is actually progressing from the center to the temperate, from the tropic to the temperate. So we need to use our capacity, our way of writing things, way of sharing things, and social media is fantastic. Other way is, how can we bring non-researchers in the discussion of a research discussion? Often we see the research society or academic societies, they only talk among themselves. They only have politicians or ministers at the beginning or in the concluding ceremony. We have no idea what we have discussed over the last 2 days. So we need to change those, and I'm sure things will change, and we will be more counted if we not become celebrities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you a lot for such a wonderful talk and also giving us such a nice perspective. And I would expect probably maybe from the organizations where you are part of, a training session for researchers of this region on how to use social media platform effectively and how to engage, not just posting journal impact factor in their post, but something interesting that would just not interest the science ecosystem, but public as well. So thank you. And so this was the last talk for this session, morning session. So we will come back at 2 with a very different perspective now, a publisher's perspective, because they are part of the ecosystem. We can't really ignore them at this point, whether we like it or not. So at 2 o'clock, we will be joined in a workshop that will be done by Dr. Jan Potter from Frontiers. So thank you. We hope to see you all again at 2 o'clock sharp. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to